Welcome to our first virtual cluster muster. Apologies for having to push it back from last week. I do know that there were some people who had penciled it into their calendar, so I do apologise for that. But it's been a good turnout anyway. So I'm actually here in ArmHub. So it is real. It is a physical entity. And we're going to hear a bit about that in a little bit, directly from Corey.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's great to have Andrew here at the ArmHub. He's in our brand new meeting room, and I'm in my office. So we're doing social distancing by force. But you can probably see in the background here, we've just newly located into 2,200 square metre facility. We'll be filling that up with projects and equipment as time and projects come on board. What I'd like to do today is just walk you through a couple of slides about the ArmHub. It's only a few of them. Give you a picture of what we've done. Some of you are very familiar with it already, looking at the list of people who have been signing on as I've gone. And some of you will have no context yet. So pipe up if there's questions, but I'll hopefully we can have some more discussion towards the end. I'm sure people have some specific questions. It's great to be able to touch base and connect in with the wider robotics community. I'm hoping everyone can see those slides now. Great. Look. So the ArmHub, it's been in development for a couple of years. We have it's about an $18 million initial investment. Our large stakeholder is the Queensland government, but equally significant is QUT. So a lot of our expertise is collaboration with QUT staff and resourcing. CSIRO is a significant partner through their facilities and expertise, like Elliot that we have here today. IMCRC are really backing us in terms of the business development and working around business assessment with companies. Fraunhofer are providing a lot of strategic advice around a whole range of industry for applications, but also some good business connections and partnerships in that space. UAP have been like a co-owner of the company with QUT. It's a not-for-profit, I haven't mentioned that yet. So, but UAP is also co-located with the ArmHub. We're sort of parallel. They have two sheds beside our one shed. So we're out at Northgate in Brisbane. That's kind of the investment matrix there. The ArmHub is really here to uplift Industry 4 capability across Australia. We're located in Queensland, and we do have a sort of some extra Queensland remit given our funding, but we do have a national reach. Our main strength, obviously, is in our title. It's the robotics capability. Many of you will know people who are involved, and you'll see pictures of them later. And we also reach out and do projects across a whole range of research institutes. So it's not just QUT and CSIRO. We can build partnerships across any of Australia's research institutes and indeed internationally where that is relevant. I'll press ahead and see what it keeps moving very fast. Well, there we go. So a little bit about what we are. We have three main services. We do industry engagement. So our role is to really work with the spectrum of companies, but we do have a focus on SMEs. So the ability to work, to spend time with them, work across, like we often will visit sites, we'll do industry engagement, we'll do demonstrators. They'll often spend time with us out on site here between the UAP site now, looking at technology options and basically getting them engaged around any of the other educational business assessment needs they might need. Perhaps the real gem of what we're set up to do is be more agile than the research or R&D sector tends to be in getting projects up in a timely fashion and perhaps a smaller fashion to basically have people adopt and then accelerate. So that's the commercial solutions area. We are able to run contracts through the ARM Hub. We're able to engage experts, whether they come from university or our partners who might be robotic integrating companies. Basically, we build a solution around the challenge that an industry partner is having. And we try to do that in a timely and a cost-effective way. That's our really quite a unique value proposition when we're starting to deal with the kinds of organisations and the size of organisations that are our partners. We also obviously provide a research and development capability and leveraging grants in that space. We do that in conjunction with our wider research partners. Now, the technical capability of the ARM Hub is to broker anything around the Industry 4 capability. We're happy to do that. There's some expertise and capability that we have at hand already committed to the ARM Hub and ready to do projects. And that sits around the robotic vision, design integration, AR and VR application, the material optimization, other forms of robotic machinery as required, and collaborative robotics, as you can see there in those other circles. And you can see the SME network of, we'll often work in companies as much as we would say work in our own facility here. So you can see down the side there some of the research partners, and many of you, some of you may be from them, many of you will know those partners already. Sector partners, so we're cross industry. So we are funded really to work across anything from, medical, construction, space, food and beverages, so the fast moving consumer goods, and basically across the spectrum that the government would like us to apply these kind of platform technologies into as relevant. And we've experienced, the hiccup that probably everyone has. We launched on the 20th of March straight into COVID. And so we've been doing a lot of work in the medical space, making masks, repurposing factories, contributing to the invention of ventilators and testing kits and all sorts of things, which is terrific. Probably prior to that, we wouldn't have had such a focus on as yet on the medical space. We are also working with, say, companies like large steel making companies that are looking at safety related issues, a whole range of projects. So we welcome that kind of diversity across what's happening, and we welcome the diversity of partnerships. We connected a little bit through our funding with the Queensland government through the regional hubs in Cairns, Townsville and Rocky. That's probably areas that many of you will know well, but actually a lot of our founding larger partners are from New South Wales and Victoria, as we've sort of commenced into this environment. Some of the things we're achieving already, we're kind of reducing a lot of labour intensive low skill tasks. So we're getting projects up to able to run sprints with companies to take out unsafe or low skill tasks and apply those skills elsewhere in organisations. So there's upskilling going on. We're helping companies reshore. Obviously that's in the manufacturing sense, that's the most important conversation and capability building that's going on. How Australia develops that sovereign manufacturing capability. And therefore, I guess the mirror of that is increasing the export opportunities and increasing employees. So we do case studies of the projects that we'll be working on. Some of those are already in development. So we can really kind of push out what's the kind of outcomes we can achieve against those different kind of services that we have on offer. So you might know many of these people. So Jonathan Roberts is our technical director. He's running with a lot of the projects across SMEs and the larger companies. Peter Cork's driving a lot of the work we're doing through R&D and kind of larger scale research initiatives. Chris is big in the agriculture space, and Matthew Dunbaden we're applying some of the technologies he's developed in the reef to other applications. And Elliot and David here from CSIRO. We look forward to a long future of collaborating on projects there. QT is also contributing a lot of their design expertise. And as you know, design comes in various forms. I was working today with a whole bunch of industrial designers working on projects, but there's user-centered design, architectural design, and sort of collaborative digital design, so process design, etc. So there's a wide team who are accessible to work on projects there. The key kind of expert resources that we can apply to projects goes well beyond this group, but this group have committed, dedicated time and resource already. So that's the starting point. I mentioned that we're sort of connected into those regional hubs in Queensland, but at this stage, just through the projects we have on the go already, we've got this kind of base of projects. Some of them are key facilities. So our partnership with CSIRO means that we're working across the RIC facility, but also working down in Victoria in Lab 22. We can run projects through there. And of course, we can run them through any of our partner universities or even partner companies as they come on board. So I happen to know, that picture is looking broader already, but it will grow across the country as projects evolve. So that's kind of the very short summary of the ARM Hub and where we're at. We've just got some, our new branding up. We've been in the shed for a couple of weeks, so it's great, like I said, to have Andrew here. We are very keen to work with a whole range of companies, so I hope that gives you a little entree if you would like to collaborate or have projects you'd like to work with us on. We're here to help broker those opportunities. So Andrew, would you like me to elaborate on anything in particular, or is there something members of the group want to talk about?
Well, I guess one thing that we talked about yesterday was that the space is still fairly sparse. There's a couple of companies there, but it's still a bit sparse. And even though I know you said prior to the crisis you had a full house lined up, what's your estimate on filling up the space, and is there some opportunities to potentially?
Yeah, look, there's definitely opportunities. Since COVID, I think people wanting to take on new spaces, often to scale up an operation, reviewing whether this is exactly the right time to do that, or doing that within some of their current facilities. So yes, there's several companies that are now looking at it, but there will be room to come here. It's good there. At the moment, the ARM Hub core operational team, which includes, well, there's myself and a chief operations officer, a business development person, a media person, and a coordinating person, actually exist in the offices in the shed. Over the next year, we will be building a new office on the UAP side, so that will actually allow office space as well as workshop space for people and projects. And so we envisage having a range of companies come and work with us either over project periods or just using it as a tenanted space. So there's probably about 1,500 square metres of space opportunity at this time.
Excellent. So just going to ask anybody if they've got any questions. Now you can raise your hand. Okay, we've got, thank you, Darren, you're a champion. Hi, Corey. When I last visited, you were focused on industrial in-place robotics. Sounds like the hub is now expanding to include R&D of a wide range of robotics. Can you explain? Yeah,
so as our relationship evolved really with our major funding bodies, which essentially is the state government, they really wanted us to explore how we can apply robotics across those industry sectors. And given it is really a platform style technology, we are able to do that. And so it's just about bringing in broader robotics capability and bringing those collaborations together. So yes, we are really well suited to a construction scale or manufacturing steel kind of context, but our teams can equally and are already equally working in hospitals, in a whole range of sites. We're working with METS teams as well, just around mechanical devices. And sometimes the input we have into projects is quite small. It's a piece of expertise or it's a piece of software, And sometimes we are actually running the projects here on site and have a major role to play in the entire project delivery process. I don't know, does that help answer your question, Dan?
Excellent. Well, thank you. I think it does. It certainly answers it in my mind. Yes, he says, so we're good.
Awesome.
A question from Tracy. Corey, do you have any questions or ideas on how the Queensland Robotics Cluster can work productively and collaboratively with ArmHub?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there is an enormous opportunity for us to come together to do business bigger. You have a great network and a deep network of, collegial relationships and business relationships and capability. The ArmHub really is focused on bringing the kind of expert collaborations and really the finance leverage to make projects happen. So if we could really tackle, I think there's nothing better than doing work together to bring, people together around things. Opportunity is the best way to collaborate. So what I'd like to do is see how we can create opportunities together of scale and really bring the businesses and the business needs to the fore and get people behind it.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of beautiful private-public partnership.
And something I shared with you on our visit to Robo Valley. Robo Valley is the robotics cluster in the Netherlands around the University of Delft. And within there is Robo House. And I see Robo House being very similar to ArmHub in terms of being physical space, being that ability to interact and actually realise projects on many different scales. So I really do see a lot of synergies.
Yeah, so I do distinguish us, like, there are, like I said, there's an enormous number of robotics, manufacturing, Industry 4. That's kind of, the spaces that we kind of inhabit here at ArmHub, like many of you inhabit, and there's quite a lot of overlap. So if I needed to cut through some of that, I think perhaps what distinguishes us is that we're really about trying to do the project. So get the money, bring the team together, deliver the project. And a lot of our effort, hopefully, is going to be spent on delivering projects. So that means we need this cluster, a lot of the other networks to come together to, bring the businesses, bring the opportunities and help us sort of scale and do things at scale with you. So I certainly think, for instance, if we're responding to COVID, wouldn't it be the right thing to do is to coordinate that capability across all of us and do it at a scale of many millions rather than project by project. I think that's a missed opportunity if we do that. So that's where my mind is with that thinking.
Excellent. So I've got a question, or Brian has his hand up. I'm going to give you the ability to talk.
I think I did email you. Oops.
Brian, are you there?
Just for a second, I've just been asked to talk.
It looks like I can't unmute him.
Is that you, mate?
I can hear Brian.
Brian, are you there? Well, while Brian's coming online, I do have another question from Young Mi Kim. Do you also take international investors to utilise your space?
Yes, we've had some conversations with companies in Europe and in China actually about how they would like to utilise the space. Most of them want to utilise it partly because of the space and partly because of the expertise that is at hand. We are open to those conversations. We're also open to how we can build supply chain opportunities with and for some of those companies, and that's really been the focus of those conversations today. So we're very, very open to have those and welcome them.
Cool. So Brian has typed in his question. Is there any works being undertaken specific within the resource sector against any identified challenge or challenges?
Actually, no. At the moment, there's conversations. Well, actually, there's a robotic vision challenge in a couple of regional centres, and that's mostly about just getting some, you know, specific kind of METS equipment up and running uniquely for the IP of those businesses that I can't really speak about now. But and then there's the discussion really about assisting businesses in the supply chain of our largest resource companies and getting robotics to kind of provide as a kind of tool for fixing and like things like robotic welding. Like this is called for across the marine sector. It's called for across mining and METS. That's kind of what the questions have been to date. So there's lots of room probably to engage more deeply with the mining and the METS sector as needed. Certainly the teams of roboticists and even the designers have had different relationships with, you know, those companies previously, so that they may come on board. It's just in the last 4 weeks of our official existence, it's been dominated by COVID.
Okay, I think we'll do one more question, again from Darren. When undertaking development of robotic assembly, we often require a climate-controlled environment. Is that something that is planned to be available with the hub, or is that, as you and I...
At this stage, we don't have any climate-controlled environment. What we would be doing, in most likely, is starting to work with our partners who have committed kind of resources as part of our partnership to providing access to those kinds of environments. So we would broker that access, and we would, you know, that's part of how we could start to drive value for getting new projects up. Other than we could always convert, so some aspects of the shed into some built climate controlled space, but that would probably mean a very strong commitment in terms of what our partner wanted to deliver. So
Cool, excellent. Well, thank you, Corey. That's been fantastic. A great introduction, and I look forward to many great collaborations over the next months, years, and on. So
yeah, terrific. And I do encourage people to reach out to us. You know, we are here now. We do have a core team, so we're very happy to start the conversation and see what we can do to assist.
Oh, okay. Actually, I do have apologies. One more question.
Yeah.
So from Nicholas Donso, how would you envisage collaboration with existing manufacturers of robotic equipment?
Oh, that would be terrific. So one of our main kind of capability is really with expertise that really deals in the kind of R&D space, wherever it fits around the manufacturing readiness level or the technology readiness level. So we really enjoy the partnerships we have with those who help basically become the commercialization partner. So we work with companies that are kind of machining manufacturers, robotic integrators. Often we will try and deliver projects in partnership with them, and we'll have the different components that we deliver. And part of our job is to bring those teams together. So sometimes we partner with them to deliver other people's things, and sometimes actually we are partnering with them to help them expand their own capability. So it does really depend on what the need is.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you, Corey.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
So next up we have Mr. Elliot Duff. So I'll just, Elliot, are you ready?
Myself. Hello there. Do I have to enable my video?
You should be able to, share your video.
Oh yeah, start my video. It says you can't stop you stopped it.
Oh, right, okay. Here we go. Try now.
You are the host now. Oh, there we go. So I had to quickly copy Corey. So so I'm out at site. I'm at home. This is the RIC, the Robotics Innovation Centre. We see this as a partner a facility with the Arm Hub, and we're making this available as well. More aligned with the field robotics rather than the manufacturing, but we see a lot of synergies happening here. Right, okay, so I've got this slide pack. So I'll see if I can find it. Yep, here we go. And I'll start it. So this is a presentation that is prepared for TAFE and school teachers and heads at high schools, because we've sort of identified, looking back through the different ecosystems, the need to have a trained workforce in robotics, but also a question around the social license. And the conversation here is around identifying the the employment opportunities in robotics. And the presentation I've added some extra words for this one is around some paradoxes that we have in the Australian market. So for those who aren't familiar, CSIRO, I've been working for CSIRO since 1986. Very interesting employment opportunities in CSIRO, diversity of projects. So I'm working for the Queensland Centre for Advanced Technology, and I'm going to skip. So this is where I work out at Pullenvale. This has been it's 27 years. Was built, funded by the state government back 27 years ago. And that's where we've built the Robotics Innovation Facility, and this is some video of that facility. So we can test sort of indoor robots, but outdoor robots. We can do flying. We've got submarines. We've got drones. We've got legged robots and all this sort of stuff. So quite a variety of ecosystems that we can test. And then we've got a simulated tunnel there that we do underground testing. So I'll skip the rest of it, but we have 3D printing and other facilities there on site that we'd like made available. This is the history of the group. So we started back I think I started in '92 at QCAP, but my colleagues, Peter Corkin, basically started back in '95 with those 4 people in the team, and now we have over 100 people working in robotics at QCAP. We're involved in automating large mining vehicles. That's the underground navigation system that's now been commercialized to Caterpillar, and the license is about to expire after 20 years, so it's been around for a while. But you can see the ecosystem that's sort of been created out of that, with Mining 3 and the robotics at the University of Queensland and at QUT and the Robotic Vision Group. And the sort of slide ended in about 2018, where we had ICRO, which is sort of triggered most of that ICRO sort of was the focus that created a lot of engagement across Australia and focused our attention on creating these communities that we're involved in at the moment. And so from a business unit point of view, people get confused about what Data 61 is. It's just a business unit. It's just a name. The reason why we just call it Data 61 is 61 is Australia's area code. If we just called ourselves business unit data, no one would find us. So 61 is a useful marketing exercise, but effectively that's all it is. It's a hexagon because 61 is a hexagonal prime number, and we're number nerds, so that excited some people. I'm in the research program that's headed by Sue Key, and in the cyber physical systems. And so we often have to explain to people what a cyber physical system is. So we see this as the intersection between robotics, AI, and Internet of Things. And increasingly, we've actually added the living. So we now call this the cyber physical social system. And where we see the intersections happening here are around, when people talk about robotics and AI, they often see them as 2 separate things or the same thing. There's a lot of confusion. For us, the important area is the overlap between AI and robotics, and we call that embodied AI. And our colleagues that work in distributed sensing and IoT, what they're looking at is embedded AI. So they're embedding the intelligence into the network. And then we have other people working on people controlling robots, and that's the sort of drones, and then putting sensors on animals and people, and we call that wearable computing. So that's a sort of ecosystem. And when I explain to teachers and students and so forth about how do humans fit into this, well, we're the living bit here. And what we do is that our role is to give robots a purpose in their life. And so we give them an intent, and from that we derive value from that intent. Effectively, we become business development managers for robots or cyber physical systems. So this is the skill set that's going to be required by students in the future, of robotics people in the future, is understanding what a robot can and can't do, and from that working out what it should do, and then deriving value from it and understanding the value proposition. Because so many times people buy a robot or think they need a robot, and it ends up in the corner because they can't work out how to get value out of it. So that's where we are. This is some of the work that dominates what we do. So this is just a quick intro to what we do. So our biggest area of work is around the 3D SLAM work, with LiDAR in particular. And this leads to a whole plethora of different activities that we've been working in terms of mining and defense and historical sites and all this sort of stuff. And once you have 3D SLAM, which stands for simultaneous localization and mapping, once you understand and perceive your environment, from that you can then develop a persistent autonomy or mobile autonomy. So these are a number of platforms that we've been involved in. You know, they're quite large machines, quite small machines, and in different areas of control. And so the skill set then is around planning, navigation, and control. So, and the culmination of that, if you combine all that together, this is probably one of our most significant challenges. And so if you're interested in what we're working on, this is the DARPA Subterranean Challenge. This is very cool, and it's really hard. And we've been paid by American Defense to do this, which is great. We've been in a couple of competitions so far, and there are a few more to come. But effectively, what we're looking at doing is a collaborative robotic system. So what we have to do in this situation is deploy these robots in an underground environment or a GPS-denied environment. Could be a building or a cave. And these robots have to go and by themselves explore the environment and find assets. And those assets can include things like people and backpacks and gas, you know, like leaking gas. And they have to tell the operator on the surface where that asset is to a resolution of a few meters. Our last performance, we got the accuracy down to 21 centimeters after going in several hundred meters into this environment. And this is quite sensitive work because what's happening, these robots are all collaborating with each other. They're all sharing maps in real time. And this is, you know, if you look up defense research, this is a very sensitive topic about getting robots to I mean, obviously Skynet would come to mind about how these robots work together. But that's where our project work is. And so I'll sort of finish the conversation of what we're doing and move on to the more general problem. So the employment opportunities in robotics, and it came to me when some, you know, I've got some school kids, a 13 and a 16-year-old, and at the parent-teacher meeting and asking about, I was mentioning I work in robotics, and they said, well, what skill set do my kids need to get into robotics? And of course, the answer 10 years ago was that you had to be an expert in mechatronics. But now that's completely changed. And what I've listed here is the skill sets that I see is required to develop robotic systems. So obviously a lot of the new stuff that's coming down is down on the bottom there about data science, which is AI, machine learning. That's where we're getting the sort of the embodied artificial robotic systems, AI. But also we're starting to look at material science and changing the form of robots. This is a lot about soft robotic systems and the intersection of material science and robotics, which I think is a very interesting area of research. But of course, a lot of the work that we've done even 10 years ago with, say, mining industry, human factors and the ethics of using these robotic systems became increasingly important. So the view here is that all of these skills are what is required, or all these skills could be used. You know, we're going to have robotic lawyers in the future. So it's not just about mechatronics. Now, of course, on the other side of, that's the supply side, and on the demand side, we have all of these industries wanting robotic technology. And obviously, we're familiar with mining and energy, but defense, and of course now with COVID, there's the medical and service area that are interested, and the traditional areas of manufacturing. So these are the domains. These actually map onto directly the robotics roadmap workshops. So these are the consumers of the technology, and so what's missing is what's in between. And so if we look at the education industry, we have schools, we have TAFE, and we have universities who are basically delivering it. And the challenge we face in Australia is obviously this audience is different to the one I was giving in teachers, but the reality is we don't have enough SMEs and OEMs in Australia to deliver the solution to the industry. So yes, the industry say they want robotics, and the universities and TAFE and all that are teaching people robotic skills, but what is missing is the industry itself that is able to deliver the capability to the domain. And the challenge here is around three aspects: adoption of robotic systems, the support of those systems once they've been adopted, and then the creation. And these messages around adoption, support, and creation get very confused. So when people talk about robotics and automation, a lot of the reports that came out through, say, Alpha Beta a couple of years ago, is most of it's around consumption. It's about, we just need to consume more robots in Australia. But it's more than that. It's just not about that consumption. It's about how we support those robots that we buy. But I'm passionate about the fact that we need to actually create the robots. We have to have an industry in Australia that is building and creating robots. So effectively what we need is a new service and manufacturing industries to build and service these robotic systems. And that's very hard because the domains effectively on the right here, that's not their key business. They're focused on their vertical about delivering value to a mining or agriculture. They don't want to create new industries. And that's a problem that we've had in Australia, which I call basically inbound innovation. So all the innovation is about consuming and modifying technology to deliver to their industry rather than creating new industries. Now, there are some bright hopes on the horizon, and one of them is the Australian Space Agency, because that effectively is a bit of a shining light that gets people out of their domain, moving into these other spaces. And there's some other interesting initiatives like AROSE, which is around remote operations. And what that came out from is the conversation is, well, if we're going to create a new industry, what's Australia actually really good at? And it turns out the rest of the world thinks we're really good at this. So let's go for what we're good at. So that's the ecosystem we have. And the problem we face in the middle there is that the lack of OEMs and SMEs that are there. And obviously the audience here, there are people being in the robotics cluster. You are the industry, but we need to grow that industry. And so it comes down to what is wrong. What's wrong? Why don't we have that industry in the middle? What's missing? Why is it missing? So there's some really funny paradoxes happening in the Australian economy. So if we look at this curve, this is called the smiling curve of value. It's used in manufacturing. And what it basically says is that when you make something, when you manufacture something, there's several phases you go through. So you do R&D, you design, you supply, production, distribution of logic, marketing, sales, and the after-sales service, the servitization. And what we've been concentrating over the last 40 years or 50 years is optimizing the hell out of production. So production or fabrication right in the middle has been optimized beyond belief. So there's not much more value that we can gain out of that sector. But the new value is in the at the ends, at the R&D and the after sales. So this is a projection from the advanced manufacturing report that CSIRO wrote. So this is the prediction, is that that's going to increase in value. And that's a great thing. That's good. And if we look at the Australian manufacturing industry, we do pretty well in two areas: medical and surgical, and aircraft manufacturing and repair. So there's Aircraft is just nearly $2 billion in exports for components that we make. And medical equipment. So, you know, ResMed, who are building they build CPAP machines, but now doing respirators in Australia. Fantastic examples of Australia's ability to do advanced manufacturing. And obviously the Arm Hub will be facilitating that. But what's interesting about what came out of the report is that at the production end, which is typically lower skill, Australia in particular, and say medical devices, is 20% dearer than the rest of the world. And if we add in energy, we're probably 50% dearer than the rest of the world. So that basically says to you, stop manufacturing or fabricating things, stop production, stop that end of it. But if we look at the higher skilled areas in research and development and in the servitization, we are 40% cheaper than the rest of the world. And with the fall of the Australian dollar, we're probably 50 or 60% cheaper than the rest of the world. So what it basically says is that researchers are underpaid in Australia. And I'll vote for that. I'll agree with that. So, but at a production level, we're expensive. So there's two things we can do. Either we lower wages in Australia for those production people, or we shift our manufacturing ideas of manufacturing to those high value things. And so that's obviously what we should do. But then we get this is what the scary thing is that if we look at, we know where the value is, but if we look at the employment, it's completely wrong, right? And so if you look at this came out last year, is that in the area that's supposed to be important, there's a fall in jobs or advertising for jobs. So there's a significant disconnect between what is commercially realistic, where we can create value, and employment. So it doesn't matter how much I go and tell a school teacher or a school kid or a parent that they should go and do STEM and they should go and do R&D. The employment is not there, right? Which is because those companies that employ them aren't there. That's the problem. So how do we fix that? So the Smiley curve is actually a very interesting problem. There's two reasons why we're not doing that. And one of them is called proximity production. So if you look at why you have to have R&D headquarters and service centers next to, you need to have them close to production because of information flow. But if we look at the technology that's coming out of the additive manufacturing Internet of Things, they sort of solve that problem, is that I can do a design piece and 3D print it, and then I can fabricate it somewhere else in China. They can 3D print it. I mean, the center of production doesn't have to be near the design or R&D headquarters anymore. And we know that to be true. We design boards now, they get fabricated in China and then they send it back and it's a product. So, but that historically wasn't true. And so if you look at what's happening here, the fourth industrial revolution is connecting the R&D to the sales, to the whole supply chain. That's what it's about. So that's great. So I think proximity to production is something that we can solve, and it's something that's going to happen. And it's increasingly happening with the COVID situation. I think that's fantastic. What's happening in manufacturing right now is a demonstration of this, that the fact that Australian manufacturers can pivot and make new products, it's because of this information flow. But the biggest problem I think we have is a cultural bias to work. So if we look at this, what we see is that a work is a worker. So there's a worker. So if I go and look up worker, people think manufacturing is making things on the plant floor. They don't think of a manufacturer being a researcher or the person writing software to service the equipment. So our cultural bias is around production and not around the R&D and the servitization ends of this value chain. And if we look at other industries, it's all the same. So when we talk about a soldier or a miner or a farmer, it's always the person who's at the production end or in the front line. It's not the support roles that actually create the value. And we need to change that. That's the problem here, because I found this very scary. That I Googled worker, and every image that came out of this had a hard hat on. Even, and it's, you know, there's women in it, and there's even third world people, but everybody's got a hard hat. Everyone. There's something fundamentally wrong with our definition of work. And this is a problem for parents and teachers about what their kids are going to have careers in, the opportunities for employment. So it's good because a lot of people know that this is the problem. And so Standards Australia and then the Growth Centre have made statements around we need to redefine what manufacturing is. And there was an interesting comment from the CEO of Siemens who said, you know, we may be exporting software to make a product, and that should be defined as manufacturing. And that's true, but it's really hard to change the dial on that definition. So this is why we need to do this. And this is a scary statistic coming out of the economic atlas. No one's gone to the economic atlas. It's just a piece of art. It's a beautiful piece of software, and it reveals so much. You have to take it with a grain of salt, but Australia has plummeted from 57th to 93rd in terms of our economic complexity. And that's significant. That trend is really worrying, and because we're falling. And what it reflects is the things that we make. So this is what we make. This is what we sell, dominated by resources. And this compares ourselves to Germany, which is much more, they're third. So this is a problem we face, is how do we add value to the economy and create employment? So if I asked a question to somebody, how would you make value from a lump of iron ore? Then most people will say, well, you could make steel, right? That's how you could add value to that. And that would be 99% of people's response to that. But you could actually create value by making a product that digs the iron ore out of the ground. And if you can't manufacture that truck, which, you know, it's a difficult issue, then you can actually build a platform that controls that truck. Or that platform then can control other vehicles. They control tractors and they control excavators. Or you can provide a service that works on the platform that produces the product. So we need this horizontal value chain rather than a vertical value chain. And we need to change that conversation. And why do we need to change? Why is economic complexity important? Well, if we look at this is what this analysis showed from the economic complexity, is where is Australia's potential growth opportunities. Sort of fascinating how they came out to this. But so what's scary about where they think Australia should have an opportunity, one is pig and poultry fat, which is a commodity. But what I'm really excited about is machines NEC. And machines NEC actually is the highest value for Australia. This is what we should be betting on. And if you Google, if you go and find out what 8476 HSE is, in that line it says it's a product and it's a robot. So the economic complexity thing is saying we should gamble on building robots. We should build robots, right? And that's purely from the data. It's not from somebody's opinion. That's coming out of the data. So that's a fantastic thing, because I don't want to be doing that. I want to be doing this. And that's what we all want to be doing. And that's what we want parents of kids to be thinking about. So the conversation we have around that is the battle of this worker thing is actually the cultural work is around a blue collar, white collar problem. And that the issue in Australia is that our social license is tied to blue collar, right? So when an industry says they need to expand or do something, their immediate response is to satisfy that social license by blue collar workers, not white collar workers. And the answer to that is, one of the things is why, say for instance, Orica have a research headquarters in Denver, not Australia, even though it's an Australian company, and researchers are cheaper in Australia. Well, the answer is because Denver values research. So we need to change the dial. And one way to change the dial is, rather than saying this is a battle between blue collar and white collar, is let's go to the conversation of no collar workforce. And this came out of Deloitte, and that's quite interesting. I quite like it. And what's interesting is that everybody that I work with is a no collar worker now. So when we look at the people who are robotics people in our lab at QCAT, is that people go into the field and they service the robot, and then they come back into the office and then they start writing some code. They're a no-collar worker. They're neither blue collar nor white collar. They are roboticists. So I think a roboticist is a perfect example of a no-collar worker. And that's where we have to start thinking about the training and skills of these people. And I'll skip this. This is what I normally give a presentation about this. Oops. So actually, I won't present because this is people should be familiar with this, but saying how this is an example of a no-collar worker. And so we have a conversation then with TAFE and others about what are the skills required for a robotics technician, and this is some of the skills that we talk about, that they need to understand how LiDARs work, how SLAM works, ROS, TensorFlow, and all these sort of things. And to that end, I'm involved in the Queensland Future Skills Partnership, which is a partnership between BMA, TAFE, and University of Central Queensland. And we're looking at developing training courses for TAFE, for a skilled workforce, and both in the creation and consumption and servicing of robotic systems. So how am I going for time, Andrew?
Sorry, just reaching for the mute. No, you're doing well, but if you can wrap up soon, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, okay, all right. So, yeah, not too bad. So the issue here is around the fourth industrial revolution. We've identified the problem in the social license issue and how we should do to fix this. And so if we look at the fourth industrial revolution, this is sort of the analysis that going to the fourth industrial revolution is around creating visibility and insight into data, but also it's about transformation of business models. And if we look at the definition of the fourth industrial revolution, it's not about technology. It's not about robots. It's not about IoT. What it is about business model transformation that is revealed by connected value chains, which is enabled by digital technologies. And traditionally, when we look at the fourth industrial revolution, we talk about connected supply chains, physical supply chains. What we don't talk about is knowledge value chains, right? But it's connected value. There's value in knowledge, right? And so we need to start thinking about the fourth industrial revolution applying to research and development, not just to manufacturing or agriculture. It's actually it's the innovation system. Innovation 4.0 is really what we're talking about, and that's about creating connected knowledge value chains. And the problem with value chains is that we end up with these really complex problems between what motivates researchers and what motivates an entrepreneur, which are actually opposite in many cases. And there's some very interesting analysis around that. So we need to sort of sort that one out. We also had to work out how to build sustainable knowledge value chains. And I think the issue here is that the clustering is around, that's what it's about. It's about creating sustainable knowledge value chains in a geographic location. It's about sharing knowledge, and it's about creating value for everyone. And there are lots of issues to do with how we do that, and we need to sort of address some of these dilemmas. And it's really interesting because what builds knowledge chains is trust. And what's really bizarre, this is another paradox, is Australia is one of the most trusting people on the planet, and we're the most trusted, right? So you would say, if we're the most trusted and we're the most trusting, we should have the best collaboration in the world. Except we're the worst. It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense. And so why don't we collaborate? And to me, the reason is we have a zero-sum view of the market. We don't look at global, we look at local. And whatever you win, I lose, and so forth. And we're not connected to each other. And so we need to create those networks, which then leads to what we've been doing in the past. So we've basically had the robotics roadmap, we've got the Queensland Robotics Cluster, and then we've got the Robotics Australia Network. These are all those efforts to create those networks so that we can create sustainable value chains, so we can create new businesses, blah, blah, blah. So this is this is the reverse this is the conclusion to that. So that's me, Andrew.
I need to unmute myself.
Okay.
Thank you, Elliot. That was awesome as always. Always exciting to hear you speak. So we did have a question, and actually there are a couple of other questions coming through. So we have actually someone from India who's dialed in, and Hitesh is really interested in what we have in way of agricultural robotics, but also robotics that are being worked on, developed for mining. So agricultural robotics and mining robotics. Do you want to?
Yeah, well, so I mean, obviously, mining robotics, where we have a track record there, the mine of the future in the Pilbara. There's lots of activity there. We need to be careful about what we say about that, because a lot of the technology has been imported. You know, so, you know, Caterpillar, a lot of the work was done back in the US originally. So we've been in a position where we've adapted that technology for the industry and been very good at that. Ironically, we have the reverse, where we've got technology that was developed locally that it's looked as though it's come from external, like the underground navigation systems. So the mining industry is a really good example of where robotics, we're probably world leading in the adoption of robotics in mining. But that hasn't necessarily translated to the robotics industry being hosted in Australia. A lot of it, Komatsu, Caterpillar, is the OEMs offshore. But there are a lot of service industries that support that around that industry. Ag is a lot harder. There's a lot of the problem in Australia is that we don't really fit the classical model I mean, there is demand. For instance, the Americans have the leading in broadacre, and the Europeans dominate in the protected farming aspects, you know, greenhouses and so forth. So a lot of robotic systems there. We have those. We have broadacre. We have protected farming. What's missing is a lot of the horticulture that we have, in particular, say, tropical horticulture. So we don't have an industry that services that, and I think that's a really interesting growth area for us. I know that QUT are working in that space around the capsicums and so forth, but I think the idea here is that there's an opportunity to grow that industry in Australia, but we don't have I mean, we have companies that are working in that space, you know, Swarm Farm and others, and there are multinationals, there are overseas companies coming into Australia, but it isn't particularly mature, no.
Yeah, it's rapidly growing, but yeah. Okay, we've got a question from Tracy. Is there any other state in Australia that are developing similar robotics VOC vocational ed courses similar to what you explained?
Yep.
Where else in the world are they doing this really well?
So Rio Tinto and Western Australian TAFE have already got a course on robotics, technician course. So we're basically using some of their learnings to develop the Queensland TAFE course. But we'll have a slightly different focus than they will. So their focus is mostly around remote operations type technician, particularly around the visualization tools, the screens and the UX end. Whereas our technicians are going to be more around the field deployment side of it. To be honest, we haven't really looked at overseas examples.
Yeah, I do know of some Canadian examples and also a body of work that's been going on in South Africa. So Tracy, I can fill you in with some of those. We have a question from Brian. Is there enough opportunity with the current schooling curriculum to further develop and promote opportunities in robotics?
Okay, so I'm of the view that there's a supply and demand problem, right? So if you talk to TAFE and educators, they see everything as a supply problem. We just need to train more people in STEM, and then magically the industry will create. Now, my view is very much a demand side, that it makes a lot more sense if you create opportunities, then people will say, well, that's an employment opportunity. And the problem we face is that the visibility of the robotics industry in Australia is not there, right? So kids and in particular parents don't see that as a career opportunity. Well, even if they did see it as a career opportunity, they'll see it as a career opportunity for their kids to go to Silicon Valley, right? They won't see it as a local, and I mean, that's what's great about the Queensland cluster, is creating a visibility for the industry so that parents can see that those companies, those SMEs in Australia as employment, so their kids stay in Australia. So I think it's incumbent upon us as the robotics community to publicize not just the skill of, the training of people in robotics, but the employment opportunities in robotics in Australia. Because unless we identify the employment opportunities, then people won't see what they're being trained for. You want the demand, you want it to be pulled, not pushed.
Yeah.
Well, you need it balanced, but I think at the moment we need a pull more than we need a push.
Exactly. Okay, Darren's got a question. Industry in Australia has a record of bad experience with research institutes and are hesitant to invest or partner with startups or small robotics companies. Do you see a way that both parties can de-risk that experience?
Yeah, look, actually, I think that was a conversation we had with Darren a couple of clusters ago. I think the problem is there's a couple of issues to do with investment and why we don't get. I mean, there's a fantastic report that came out from University of Sydney from their American Studies group, and they did a comparison of ag tech investment between Australia and America. So their investment is 50 times ours per GDP, right? Not total, per right? So ours is appalling. It's appalling investment, right? Compared to the US, to everyone else, we're absolutely terrible at ag tech investment. Yet that's one of our dominant exports. So what is going on? Why can't we get ag tech investment? What's the problem? So one of the conversations we had is obviously getting those people into Australia and getting them looking at seeing Australia as a place that they can invest. But I think a part of the problem may be the visibility of the industry and the risk. So if you've got a small company, a robotics company that seeks investment, if they're by themselves and they have no ecosystem around them, they're going to be a high risk. If the investing company comes along and says, well, look, there's one company here, but there are 5 or 6 around them that they can draw skills from, that, or they, if this fails, then it can go to this one. I think that having that, showing that we have a mature ecosystem, it's a bit of a chicken and egg though, I understand. Having a mature ecosystem would make the investment more attractive. Because obviously we are cheaper for research, right? We are cheaper for that. We are for doing the research and design. There's no disputing that. So what's stopping the investment, I think, is the perception that we don't have a mature ecosystem to support that company. So the risk is not that they technically can't do it, it's they won't have the support infrastructure around them to create the product.
Jason then also asked an investment question. Is the investment in Australia too skewed in the direction of mining projects?
Yeah.
And probably underpinned by what you were highlighting.
Well, yes and no, right? So it's really what you do with the money, and it's this. I think. Look, I've had the conversations about other people who said, look, we just create a new industry off by itself. I'm more of the view that we should leverage existing industries and move them into other areas, right? And so, for example, all the work that's been done in the Pilbara around autonomous vehicles, what's really interesting about or disappointing about what's happened is that none of that technology has bleeded into transport, mobility, or to agriculture or construction. But they haven't, so because they're all inbound innovation. The innovation is all about delivering value to the industry, not to creating new industries. So it really requires a change of thinking of those industries to say, well, yes, it's great that we invest all in mining, but when we do that, we have to understand that we should pivot at some stage to construction or to other industries and leverage that investment. And that's about opening some IP portfolios, because that's what's locking them down at the moment, right? So I won't name names, but the companies are locking the IP down so it can't service the other industries, right? And that's the problem. I don't think it's bad that we invest in mining or defense. I think they're great because everything's got a dual use. Everything in robotics, we're a platform technology, right? What is locking them down is the intellectual property problem. And so we have to be a lot smarter and change the dial and perhaps convince governments that this is important, that yes, we can invest in mining here, but if we do that, then you have to open the innovation to other industries, to construction and other industries.
Okay, one last question really, but it's probably more of a clarification question. Elliot, you spoke about the initiative with the TAFE. Is the aim of that to start producing personnel or skilled people who are not at the research level, but are have the qualification to undertake the actual hands-on field repairs?
Yeah, the latter. It's definitely for servicing and maintaining robotic systems, and that's also part of that investment problem. Because yes, you can build a robot. Yes, I can invest in you, but how are you going to service and maintain that robot when it goes out into the field? And if you don't have that cohort of trained staff, then you won't get into the market, right? So all the ducks have to line up. And part of we can have the research into building new robots. We can have this, we can have that, but unless we get all those players in position, then it's not attractive to invest in.
And just following on from that, there could well be an opportunity with these courseware and opportunities to potentially lead globally and offer to international students or have some way of leveraging this global phenomenon that we're working through as a result of the crisis of digital everything. And being able to provide those courses online.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, also as well as building robots and exporting robots, we should be exporting the knowledge on how to service and maintain those robots, and even people to go out and service and maintain those robots.
Yeah.
So, yeah. The other interesting thing is that appreciating that the skill set of somebody who services and maintains robots is quite different to a creator. And having conversations with some companies, robotics companies, their argument around a lot of is that the skill set of a university is around, they want say if you're debugging some code, debugging somebody else's code requires a completely different skill set than writing your own. Right?
Yes, exactly.
And, okay. and not to judge or anything, because it's a different skill set, right? And there's different egos and stuff. And the other aspect to the training is, and speaking to some SMEs around this, is they want people who can go out in the field and debug and fix stuff, right? But they also want those people to have a bit of a business mentality about sales. So they want those people to go out and do some maintenance, but they also want them to sell the next product. And that's not necessarily it's not true, but that's not necessarily a university skill. But to be honest, the conversation we're having around this no-collar workforce is, I think the whole issue of university and TAFE is just going to disappear. So it's all going to be micro-credentials, and people are going to drift around and all over the place. I think that's yeah.
Yeah, it's already happening. Okay, one last question from Shana. Do we think lack of network connectivity is the reason that Australia doesn't get behind tech for mining, agriculture, forestry, etc., as they haven't realised the value from tech, as it doesn't work in remote areas? Like, is that connectivity, network connectivity, an underlying issue?
I think it's not necessarily a cause and effect. I think the problem we have in Australia is a social license problem, is that we only value the worker, not the researchers and the builders and all them. Like we have a marketing problem around manufacturing. People think we don't manufacture anymore. So, you know, there's some significant problems in our culture, and one way to fix that is to create networks that can represent the industry and create visibility for the industry, and have conversations with parents and teachers and politicians about valuing R&D and valuing a manufacturing industry in robotics. We can't do that unless we create a network, because otherwise we're just single voices in a plethora of other voices. So we need a lobby group. We need lobbying. We need to change the dial, right? And we need to to create that lobby, we need to bring in parents of kids, because they're the ones who are going to be talking to the local politician to say, I want my son or daughter to be a robotics person, right? We've got to start there. It's no good going around and saying, well, we need to do this, unless we've got to solve the politics.
So, and here's another perspective, IP. You've also got IP getting locked up, and you kind of indicated that with some of the players. Is that being locked up on the server side as well? Like not releasing the software, the code, proprietary systems, etc. Is it a problem on the services? Well, we're seeing it on the product side, but is it also seen on the services side?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's probably locked in more on that side. So, you know, nearly everything you look at, say, the mining industry, everything's bespoke, right, for that particular mining company. So, you know, at their end, they need to start thinking, if I release the companies are changing their tune a little bit. They have changed their tune over the last couple of years. They are thinking about this. I know that yes, they're looking at open platforms, and they're looking at shared IP. But then they're having an interesting conversation with the OEMs, right? So everybody has to be of that view that if we all work together and we all share appropriately the intellectual property, then we actually the pie gets bigger, right? That's the whole point, right? The pie gets bigger. Your slice might get smaller, but you get more out of that slice, right? And we need to have that view of growth, and we don't have that in Australia. We have very much a zero-sum view of the world, and the mining companies are also competing with each other rather than saying, well, actually, if we worked on this. I mean, the interesting thing is that if by sharing IP around, say, autonomous vehicles, what we can do is actually increase the value or the reliability of that technology, because you're sharing the cost with other people. So anyway.
So just a comment as we wrap up on this, so we can move on to the panel. As Tracy sort of also highlights that there's a failure in our industrial policy. The OECD identifies this as one of our big weaknesses.
I'm putting my bat up, and I'm just letting that go to the keeper, that one.
Excellent. Right.
I'm not. Look, I think to be honest, I mean, I obviously can't answer that, but it is amazing what's happening with the COVID situation, right? So I think the dial around, you know, the importance of strategic manufacturing and strategic capability in Australia is going to become paramount, and I think that's going to change all of the conversations that we currently have. Yeah. So I'm very hopeful about that.
Yeah,
but I can't possibly comment.
Okay, I'm going to reclaim the host. While I get the panel set up, I'll give you guys an opportunity to jump up and grab yourself a beverage, go visit the restroom or what have you. So I just need to bring in our other panelists. If I can find them, it's on the list. Here we go. Welcome, Shana. Welcome, Sergio. And where's Nathan? find Nathan. We might have lost Nathan. Anyway, I'll, oh, here he is. Got him. So, panelists, can you hear us? Are you unmuted? I'll just get you to introduce yourself, so that won't need to introduce yourself, Elliot. We all know who you are. But Shana, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Will do. I can't put my video up. I don't know why, Andrew. It's just saying you can't start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, right. Okay.
Maybe Sergio and Nathan are in the same bucket, maybe.
Yeah, I'm same boat.
I can make you a host, Shana. There we go.
Beautiful. Thanks, Andrew. So yes, Shana Glover, CEO of Invelo and co-founder of Invelo. So background, sort of 20 years in mining in BHP, and then started up, Alan Bowe and myself started up Invelo about October last year, focusing really on, for those who were in Elliot's session, thank you, Elliot. It was wonderful as always. We focus on 4.0, so exactly as Elliot said, business model transformation and connectivity of the value chain.
Excellent. I'm just going to reclaim the host again, and I think I can do this. Maybe. Anyway, I'll give yourself a host, Nathan, so you can introduce yourself.
Hi everybody. So my name's Nathan. Up until recently, I was head of robotics at Langer Rock, which is a big construction company. Now, depending on who you ask, I either work there or don't work there. Their official story is I don't work there because they like to make companies. So I'm the CTO of a spin-off company that's just got something in the order of millions of dollars of VC money to do deep tech product. Just between you and I still kind of work at Langer Rock, still doing the robotics thing anyway, but Langer Rock's good at making companies.
Excellent. Welcome, Nathan. And again, it's always a pleasure to have you. So I'm just, Sergio, I'll just make you host. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. Yes, Sergio Zachariah, broad background in technology implementation and with bringing that to market. My story so far is that I've been involved with Mets Ignited, helping clusters to from startup phase and bringing them into fruition. So currently there's a couple of other cluster groups that I'm involved with, which is a tail into mine affected water and a digital and data analytics, which dovetails very nicely into robotics. And that's well and truly a full-time job, an exciting job, and it's something that commercialisation and bringing technologies to the front for Australia is really a big part of my driver for it.
Excellent. Well, welcome. And I've got a couple of questions, but also I'm going to encourage everybody online to use the Q&A or the chat to post any questions. So I'm going to aim this first question at yourself, Shana. So from your perspective, on interacting with your clients globally and around Australia, in your perspective, what's changing as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, Andrew, I work in forestry, mining, agriculture, or oil and gas, so across a lot of the industries, not now just in mining. And I guess, we are seeing as they go through COVID, in the short term, they're very focused on their operations and probably aren't thinking very much to the future, which is understandable. They're trying to basically keep the continuity of their operations running through some pretty trying times, obviously challenges around workforce and access to workforce, with borders shut. And FIFO workforces, all these things are really challenging for organisations. But so that's kind of what we've seen, I guess, over the last, 6 weeks. But what I've started to see over the last week or so is organisations starting to get their head around their innovation and technology approaches. again, and how do they actually start to think about their use of innovation, probably being more aggressive. I think a lot of them have realised that they probably should have been doing more, and they might have found getting through COVID a bit easier because they would have actually had more connectivity, you know, of their supply chains, more ability to actually drive productivity remotely with their workforce, and generally have, I guess, a lot less people in transactional work at the operations, you know, which, you know, can be done by, you know, obviously the use of automation and robotics. So that's kind of the feedback and what I'm seeing from the clients that we've been working with at the moment.
Nathan, from your perspective, because you've got visibility deep in the construction world, what are you seeing as being key aspects of change that's happening as a result of COVID?
I find it really interesting. There's three main kind of categories of people in my life. So I've got a fair few people working for me. They fall roughly into research and developers, field engineers, and business people. The R&D guys and girls probably haven't even noticed. So still work remotely, still checking things on the internet, still stay at home all the time, and that's pretty easy. That's a great thing to manage because didn't have to do anything new. The field guys, a bit like Shana was just talking about, literally cannot do their job. So can't go to places, can't talk to your own, can't travel anywhere, no one will answer. They're hearing lots of positive things, which I think Shana also touched on, of, oh, we probably should have listened. We probably should have done that thing in the past. Maybe when business opens again, we'll do it now, just in case this ever happens again. The business people, I'm hearing exciting and scary things at the same time. So you can imagine the CFO kind of sitting there going, we spend a lot of money on premises. We don't need premises anymore. We've just proved we don't need premises. We should not rent anywhere anymore. But maybe that was an overreaction. Maybe we can relax, having to sit there between 9 and 5 just for the sake of it. But we probably should still have somewhere. I think the most exciting thing out of all that is change is no longer feared. Change is now out of our control. So we should do it, and we will all kind of step over to this output-driven mentality of, well, if you can make it work, maybe that's what we should have done as well, which is a positive thing.
Excellent. That's a great answer. Sergio, in your world, what are you seeing changing?
Yes, very similar to Nathan and also to Shana, where the people that are involved in field work is that's virtually the tap's been turned off. Probably the other part of it that people have been feeding back to me is that contracts and general business work that they're doing has been good up until March. But if we look at projects and a pipeline of projects, most of the organisations that I'm involved with have a good pipeline of projects, and a large percentage of those have been put on ice while they haven't been cancelled. There is way too much uncertainty, and people are saying, okay, not now. And that is a very, very strong message that's coming out.
Excellent. And back to you, Elliot, from a research perspective, I think you indicated some of it in your presentation, but what do you see that's changing as a result of
Well, I mean, just broadly, I think because of the research community's response to COVID and their engagement with industry to solve problems, the value of, I mean, as well as valuing frontline people, there's been a conversation around, valuing teachers and valuing doctors and valuing pizza delivery people and all this. I think there is particularly by government, there's a value in understanding that research actually helps respond to these crises. And having researchers that can pivot and be redeployed. So very interesting, some stuff about redeployment happening across the organisation, across research company and across government, about people being redeployed to service other areas. So I think the value of those people is being appreciated. I think the other really interesting thing is what's going on is is the level of collaboration that's happening in terms of and using of digital tools. So, the old joke, the joke that's gone around, what created a digital transformation in your company? Was it the CTO, the CEO, or COVID? The answer is COVID, right? And for me, you know, we go around talking about industry and talking about industry adopting Industry 4.0 and digital platforms and strategies. But to drag research into the digital age, I've found that basically research is conducted in workshops, physical workshops. That is the dominant way that people do work in research. They write papers, they send emails, they do not adopt the digital platforms that, we don't have digital platforms like PLMs and ERPs that industry use, right? We're analog, right? Research is analog. And I think what's really fascinating now is that the research end, the knowledge workers across Australia, both research and non-research, are now becoming digital capable. And that's reflected in an interesting number, like in this GovTeams, which is the government, all of government Microsoft Teams platform that Department of Finance released. So at the end of last year, they've opened it for a couple of years now. They had, I think just over 20,000 people. I checked it this morning, 78,000 people are now connected to that network with 10,000 groups.
Wow. Right.
So, you know, whether they, you know, they're saying, oh, hang on. And I also, what I found interesting is that this is a real opportunity for Australia in that I can attend industry conferences overseas now. So I attended a Here Technologies presentation in Atlanta earlier this week at 3 o'clock in the morning. But historically, I would have had to flown. But like Australia, we do miss out, particularly academics, we miss out. We go to academic conferences, but we can't justify going to a lot of the industry conferences. They are expensive, you know, they're expensive to go to and you know, getting the overseas. I mean, effectively, researchers can't go to industry conferences unless there's business, right? You can't do it on a whim. You know, you can go to an academic conference if you submit a paper. But now I can just dial in. It's all virtual, right? And I think if that's a huge thing, our research community can be connected to global industries now. Before it was really hard.
So Nathan, just feeding off that, you've been an adjunct professor with some US universities in the past, and I think you still are with one of them. Do you see this whole crisis sort of helping to bring together researchers globally and potentially breaking down some of those traditional barriers between research institutions?
So I think we're talking about post-crisis. So just so everyone knows, during crisis, the knee-jerk is a bit like Sergio said, everything's shut down and we'll deal with it later, and we better shut down things just in case it wasn't shut down enough already. But post-crisis, I think the world that Elliot painted out is probably gonna, or hopefully gonna stick. So this concept, so I remember at Stanford, like about 6 or 7 years ago, I had to argue with the dean for hours and hours and hours, not in one sitting obviously, to get him to allow me to do a lecture via something like Zoom for an advanced smart technologies of the future class. I don't think that's going to happen again. I think after something like this, it was like, yeah, I'm just going to do it via Zoom. And they'll be like, how else would have you have done it? Yeah. So I think that's great. And then I think because that will become the norm, the type of thing that I think Elliot pointed out the most will just become really common. We'll be able to have these 5-minute or 10-minute conversations with people that are all throughout the world, all in different industries, because they're just used to it now. They're just okay with it. We can just have a 15-minute Zoom call with someone in industry overseas. There might even be Zoom drop-in rooms where there's a little industry forum over, you know, overseas somewhere that puts out a little link saying, I'm interested in these kind of things. If you're a researcher that does that kind of thing, can you log in and talk to me? That is those kind of things that are now possible, because no longer do we even have to go across the road to have the meeting. We just sit there and click, and my back hurts and my 3-year-old and 4-year-old sitting next to me right now. That's the downside.
Yes. Yes, I've been in the chair. It was only the fact that I had to come here. I've been online since early this morning. Okay, so Shana, what in terms of, and maybe you can put a positive spin on this if you want to, But what does the new normal look like? I think we can all, agree that we're not going to return to exactly the way things were. There will be some resemblance of it, but what does the new normal look like from your perspective?
Well, it's a hard question, I think, Andrew, and I think many people are probably more expert than me toying with what the new normal looks like. So I don't think anyone really knows how, I guess, elastic, the way we were working truly was, and how much of that will return. But certainly, I think just a couple of things from my perspective. I think government's role in the way the economy works, I don't know. I think it's going to be heightened. I think we've seen that, in every country, them need to get, very engaged and probably more effective. We've probably seen our politicians more effective than I've certainly ever seen them in a long time in Australia. So I'd like to think, maybe it's my wishful, as you said, positive thinking that sticks. We've seen them unify across the states here in Australia. They've done that well. They certainly have struggled with that more in say, the US. So, I think the government's role will be, more heightened. So it'll come on to some of the questions I think Andrew will talk about in a moment about how can we leverage some things for the robotics industry, post-COVID. But I think if we remember that hopefully governments will play that heightened role, we should look to leverage in there. I think the new ways of working, as Nathan, a lot of people have said on the line, I think they will stick, because I think people have been living in this flexible work for many weeks now to really sort of get more used to it. There's those of us who, for me, it really hasn't been a great change because I've always been a really flexible worker. But a lot of people, for instance, when I was at BHP, I would say weren't. There were those people who had to rock up at 7 o'clock every morning, put their shoes under the desk and sit there all day. And they struggled with, a lot of the work that the company was doing around flexible work, hot desking, so this has been the classic, trial by fire of hot desking for people at the extreme. So I think, it will change the way people work, and I agree it'll advantage Australia, us being so remote. And then probably the last one for me is carbon. I think climate change is going to be even more aggressive in terms of the focus and the imperatives and the targets that get put in place by countries, because they've seen how much we can achieve when you really change your ways of working. So I think climate change and carbon targets will be equally a focus, Andrew. That's probably just a few from my side.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a executive from Wally Parsons, and he actually made the comment that they're already making plans to downsize their physical office infrastructure because they feel that maintaining this remote work is the way to go. Sergio, what's your perspective on what the new normal will look like?
I just took a moment to unmute myself. I saw a comment come in from Tracy. I think never waste a good crisis, and I think that's a good ethos to think about. And probably piggybacking on what Nathan and Shana have also said, that I'd like some of these technologies to stick. During 2008, I was running a business, and the catalyst for transforming it to a digital way of operating was a little thing called the GFC. So hopefully that's a message that we can continue to bring to people that are involved in the broader network, and we can see it happening across the country, that some of these are really good technologies. It doesn't mean that we have to spend 40 hours to get to Europe and all those sorts of things to be able to participate. So I'll probably be investing in 360-degree cameras, because I'd like to run most of my meetings in the future, both as physical form and also digital. So I'm looking forward to it.
So invest in VR and AR, you reckon? Okay, Elliot, from a robotics perspective, with these thoughts of what a new normal would look like, what's your perspective of some of the opportunities for robotics?
Well, look, I think that people are, one of the interesting conversations that came out of the defence workshop that we had and the comment was that there's a crisis of imagination in robotics. And I think this is an opportunity that people are seeing, that we can reset that, we can create better expectations around what robots can do, and also have longer conversation, longer future predictions. So rather than worrying about what a robot can do in 3 years, we can sit there and go, what's it going to do in 30 years? So I think those conversations are happening, and I think that's where the opportunities lie, is that that people are being forced out of their comfort zone, and they're realizing that they need to imagine a different future, and robots play a role in that future. And it's up to us to actually create the vision, but I think people are far more receptive to that vision than they used to be.
Nathan, what are your thoughts on the opportunities for robotics?
I can't help but drag it back to a very simple level. So I think rewind 6 months, the expectations of robotics were very Hollywood. So we thought they could do everything and they just do everything themselves, and we'd all go to the beach and that would be it, it'd be over. I think through this crisis, it's forced people to reframe in a way that I think we already were reframed. So robotics probably is not going to come out of the box doing everything, but it might just be one more cog in your system. We've been put in a situation where we can work effectively remotely, but that's probably only 90% of the time, 80% of the time, 95% of the time, depending on who you are. We still need this hand or this soft touch or this light touch to do that one little task. So that gives rise to the importance of this whole field of semi-autonomous robots. So not quite this, stupid bloody Skype screen on broomstick telepresence thing. Sorry if anyone makes telepresent robots, but actually something that can kind of half or most do the job by itself. Yeah. Those things can still be the body in the office or on the remote center that we only need to dial into once or twice a week to be able to effectively work remotely from home. I don't know if that's exactly what's going to unfold, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. It doesn't matter. The bit that excites me is now that's tolerated. Now, the general audience or the general public goes, yeah, I can see how that would be useful. That is actually probably a better solution for me as a person rather than the Hollywood Terminator. For us as roboticists, we still probably can't do that one either, but it's a bit closer.
Absolutely. Ashana, have you got an opinion?
Yeah, I kind of think, Andrew, when I have a look at kind of what's going on in the industries I'm working with at the moment, I sort of see, I came from doing a lot of business continuity planning in BHP, and I've got to say, we never did a pandemic in the whole time I was there, so maybe they don't like me saying that, but yeah, it wasn't we did floods and the known knowns, so, I kind of think it's interesting. I think we will see as we go forward, I guess a lot of the stuff we're hearing around, sovereign capability, there is that, but there's also business continuity. And I think we're hearing and seeing a lot of the two mixed up. They are two very different things, obviously building sovereign capability in some areas, but just some basic good business continuity planning is not really in place in a lot of the businesses. So I kind of think that can be certainly an opportunity for us in the robotics area as well.
Yeah, I had a conversation with someone who sort of highlighted exactly that. What this pandemic has highlighted is where companies' digitization plans were weak, where the gaps were. And where some of the areas that they had to really prioritise and focus. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It did take a lot of people by surprise. So feeding that back into the economy piece, what are the opportunities with potentially leveraging use of robotics, growth of robotics, manufacturing of robotics to help grow the economy? What's your opinion on that, John?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, one of the things that certainly a couple of us, I don't know whether Darren's also on the line, that we've been talking about in the Queensland Robotics cluster, as well as through the Robotics Australia group. You know, when you look at, you know, I think there's been a huge amount of talk, if people have been following the press, around Australia's manufacturing capability. You know, it was at 30% of GDP in 1960. We are now at 5%. So I've got a pretty cool graph I like sticking up regularly, and it's just sad and shocking. And I guess I came out as an engineer in the early 90s, and showing my age. And, you know, I worked in industries, you know, like BHP, where we had a lot of manufacturing. We had a steel arm. And so we did a lot more innovation, and manufacturing is generally, in most economies globally, if you have a look, it's correlated with innovation. It's the manufacturing sector that drives R&D and innovation. And so I think the fact that Australia's innovation, frankly, is pretty crap, is in line with our manufacturing now being at 5%. I think, you know, probably a correlation graph exists between the two. So, you know, I would like to see, you know, we've seen the working groups. I think there's a task force under Andrew Liveris being started up to specifically look at what should Australia be doing in manufacturing. And that's certainly an area that we've been having some talk at the Queensland Robotics Cluster around how do we lobby, you know, put together a positioning paper into that group that talks particularly around robotics, but also make sure that we help educate you know, the stakeholders on robotics, because I think when you use the term robotics, they either think of a vacuum cleaner, sadly, if their understanding the industry is quite limited, or if it's a bit better than that, they generally think of the robotics in, you know, car manufacturing or, you know, manufacturing plants. So field robotics is not something that they even think about. And it is the capability that, you know, a lot of, not all, but a lot of the SMEs in our cluster have. You know, they're working in industries like agriculture and mining and working in areas of field robotics. So to me, it's just such a great opportunity to be able to try and drive into that manufacturing conversation, that task force. How do we grow both the field robotics, the manufacture of field robotics, but also at the same time the jobs in rural areas that actually maintain our field robotics, you know, in ag and mining. So, you know, so certainly for me, I think that's, you know, that's a great opportunity, and one that, you know, the cluster can get behind, because, you know, they'll want to know what's the business case, and we'll need some actual real information around SMEs, around if we could harness funding, more focused funding into field robotics, who, you know, what companies would they be, and what could they do with that funding to build, you know, manufacturing and capability in Australia. So, so certainly we're going to need to reach out to people to be able to pull that story together. But for me, huge opportunity. We just need to work together, Andrew, to try and leverage something into that conversation, so that, you know, they consider us as an industry for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to get each of you to answer one last question, and that is, what should we be focusing on in the short term? What should we be doing right now? Elliot, do you want to start off?
All right. Well, obviously, I mean, we're focusing right now on the roadmap, and looking at what we didn't do, what hasn't been achieved in the first roadmap. So there are a list of things that were recommendations, and there are some things that have worked, such as creating the networks and creating the clusters. Some things that haven't worked, such as create the facilities, although that's happening as well. But I think that's where we should be focusing, and creating that narrative about what needs to be done in Australia to build an Australian robotics industry. So that's where we're sort of focusing right now, is building that narrative, and using that narrative to challenge the imagination of the industries that we're talking to, right? Yeah.
That's a great answer. Nathan, in your perspective.
Mine's very easy. I think we should demonstrate that we should have been doing more with what we already have in this country. And we need to just demonstrate it in very big, very visible ways and say, I don't know how to say it politely, but it makes people in industry or the wider population know that we could have been doing it all along and we're going to do better in the future, so they should pay attention more.
Yeah, excellent. Sergio?
Yeah, I think it's been very well covered by a number of the panellists today, and it's really about strengthening the supply chain and making sure that we are visible out there. It's a case of we've got all these fantastic capabilities on everything from research to manufacturing to everything else, but there's an opportunity now that's been recognised by government that the supply chain is not strong enough, and it's a moment in time where we can tap into that and actually showcase what we can do and put the whole piece of the jigsaw, all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together with support. If the government comes on board, the government's come on board.
Excellent. And finally, Shana, any last words?
Yeah, probably just, you know, like everything, it's so easy for us to, because, you know, we've got COVID on. I guess what I'm trying to do in Velo is make sure we also stand back and think about the other challenges that we already had on the go that we knew about post or pre-COVID world. And so for anyone running a business, it's thinking about your strategy and yes, how you can do more to, you know, build your business in line with COVID challenges. But like as an example, we were doing a lot on bushfires, and bushfires were a really big thing before COVID. And all of a sudden, you know, kind of no one's talking about bushfires, and frankly, almost most of Australia burnt down. So, you know, the idea for robotics, you know, to support early detection, linkages of data in terms of the way that we can actually fight, you know, use our limited resources to fight fires better. I don't know, all that space. I just look at it and think, you know, Australia's very, you know, in a very poor place there. So, you know, so yeah, I think we need to certainly be focused on the pandemic and our responses, but continue to stand back, I think, Andrew, and just think about all the other opportunities or challenges which become an opportunity for the robotics sector.
Yeah, can I just add that, you know, that issue about the bushfire? I mean, this is the problem of, you know, that we'll just move on to the next disaster, right? And we're just running from one disaster to another. I mean, I'm in the bushfire science response, and you know, like, and we're you know, it's great, but what we need to do is step back and look at this as building resilience into the whole country, and robotics, and what role can robotics play in resilience and recovery, and as a general level, not looking at, you know, down at the you know, the weeds, and actually solving this bushfire and then this flood and then this pandemic and this locust plague and this asteroid that's going to hit us, you know, like, and have a look at it more at a general level. I think that's where we could add some value, looking at that higher level resilience and what role robotics and AI and all that could actually build into into the fabric of Australia.
Here.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank all of you for being a fantastic panel. Some great conversations. I've got some additional questions and comments. I'll make sure that they get to you, and we can get some answers out to you. Just in the last few minutes of the meeting, and we have missed out on a couple of activities. But that's okay, because we can pick up on it afterwards. So I did share with you a mural board. So it's open. We can actually use that as continuing some of the conversations after this session, because we are really focusing on taking action and really raising the profile of robotics and addressing some of the key issues and key things that we talked about. During this panel, and also during the talks today. So I do employ you. It's actually gone out to the whole cluster. So I do encourage you to use that environment. And I might pose some further questions and put some of the feedback on afterwards. In the last minute, I'm not going to go through this, but I am going to circulate some information about this. But we're launching a mentoring program It's become evident, especially during this crisis, that accelerate some of these programs. And the purpose of this is actually focusing very much on the robotics aspect of it and trying to really help our young roboticists and young companies to grow. And so I've already got a number of mentors from some of the overseas clusters lined up, and going around and collecting a group of good mentors. But there is going to be the call out for mentees that want to participate in this program. It's going to be about a 6 months program. So I look for more information on this. And then finally, just as we close, I want to highlight that we've got, so keep looking at the website, qldrobo.org. You'll see the latest podcasts. We've got a new podcast coming out tomorrow, starring Nathan. So look for that one. And I've also got a number of guests lined up for the coming weeks. I've got no shortage of panelists, so I think we can definitely keep that going on a bi-weekly basis. So keep that coming. I'm also going to put out a question to the cluster on whether or not it's worthwhile to have these virtual cluster musters on a monthly basis, because as you saw, the conversation was pretty engaging. And I think there is opportunities to do this more regularly than the physical every 2 months. So anyway, I'll ask that question for feedback. So with that, I'm conscious we are 1 minute over, and it is at the end of the day, and we probably all have been stuck to our screens. So I want to thank Corey for allowing us to be here at the Arm Hub. And we'll be also making sure that as things develop here, we'll make that available to all the members and the wider audience, because I think we need to be singing our successes. I want to thank all the speakers. Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, the panelists, for a great panel. And have a good rest of the day. Any feedback, please send me an email or a comment on the network. Thank you, and be safe.
Thank you, Andrew.